I'm Tatiana Zappardino, and I'm honored to host this special virtual VE Day commemoration. 75 years ago, on May 8, 1945, the Allies formally announced Nazi Germany's surrender, ending more than 5 years of brutal fighting and over 40 million deaths in Europe alone. President Harry Truman called it a solemn but glorious hour. Celebrations erupted all over the world, including in the United States. Americans gathered together to express a range of emotions. Their euphoria that their friends and family would be coming home. Their grief for the hundreds of thousands who would never step foot on American soil again. And their fear for those service members still fighting in the Pacific. But for a moment, the world celebrated the hope of peace.
I wish that Franklin D. Roosevelt had lived to see this day. General Eisenhower informs me that the forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations.
After more than 5 years of conflict, the war, which had decimated families, towns, and cities, came to an end via an unconditional surrender on May 8, 1945.
The flags of freedom fly all over Europe. The power of our people to defend themselves against all enemies will be proved in the Pacific War as it was proved in Europe.
To those watching from home who fought for global peace 75 years ago, whether you wore a uniform, built a plane in a factory, or grew vegetables in your own victory garden, we want to thank you for your sacrifices to our nation.
You know, when I was a kid, almost every adult over the age of 30 was a member of the Greatest Generation. In fact, my Uncle John, he was a lifelong Army career guy, and he used to put on the USO shows during World War II. He got stars like Sinatra and Bing Crosby and all those guys to go around. So when I got to do USO shows, it was a huge honor. I got to go to Bagram Air Force Base and Desert Storm and Aviano and all these places. And I learned a lot about the Greatest Generation. When I was a kid, people didn't talk about their war experiences. It wasn't until you went through a dresser drawer, you attended a funeral, you found out, what, Uncle Mike was a Purple Heart recipient, or Uncle Joe, Silver Star? You know, they just didn't talk about it. They were ordinary Americans who did extraordinary things under hellacious circumstances.
When you think about the young men and women that served during World War II, what they did is they walked away from their homes all across America, from their jobs, their careers, their hopes and dreams, and they decided to serve. They volunteered in the millions to go defend their country abroad from fascism. I served abroad in Europe for many years, so I had also had the chance to not only combine my understanding of America's participation in World War II, but also the ability to live in Europe and walk many of those battlefields and get an understanding of what the combat might have been like at that time. When you look at that, when you study the war, you just have to be inspired by men and women who served for many years, oftentimes being wounded and going back into combat, but more importantly, having no idea of when the war might end. It went on for years, year after year, month after month, serving in combat against the Axis. Really inspires. And then on top of that, what we saw was these young men and women go home, return to the United States, take their uniform off, and just pick up their lives in many ways where they left them, in their hometowns, going back to work, maybe pursuing a career, an occupation or a college, getting married, and just building their families. I think that those two things combined are why they really inspire me and remind us all that they were and are the greatest generation.
Today, people around the world are fighting a different kind of battle, one that cannot be defeated with military units, one that prevents us from joining together to commemorate the 75th anniversary of VE Day. But today's challenges will not stop us from paying tribute to the greatest generation.
To our World War II heroes, we are blessed to have watching. The men and women of U.S. European Command and all of NATO's allied command operations salute you. Our nation and the world will forever be in your debt. In these uncertain times, as ever, we are eternally inspired by your grit, selfless service, and sacrifices in defense of freedom, democracy, and one another.
Victory in Europe was gained through an allied force made up of countries with a common goal: to defeat evil and defend freedom. Introducing the man who coined the phrase, the greatest generation, Tom Brokaw.
VE Day. I was 5 years old. Victory in Europe and World War II. An enormously important celebration. We had taken on Hitler and Europe and prevailed with the help of our allies, when a lot of people didn't think that was possible. So now is the time to remember the glory of VE Day.
My dad was a major influence in my decision to join the United States Marine Corps. Seeing my dad in uniform and what it represented, honor, courage, selfless service, inspired me to wear the uniform myself. The most senior officer in the military was also inspired by his mother and father to serve our country. I would now like to introduce the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley.
Both my parents were part of the greatest generation and proudly served in World War II. My mother served with the Navy at a hospital in Seattle, taking care of the wounded returning from overseas. My father was with the 4th Marine Division. They made the assault landings at Kwajalein, Saipan, Tinian, and Iwo Jima. And although both have passed on, I carry their example of integrity and selfless service as daily inspiration.
Since the mid-90s, we've been losing these heroes at the rate of about 1,500 a day. And now we're down to just a handful. But I'm glad we still have that handful here to thank. And we're more fortunate you can hear a lot of them in their own words and pictures by taking a look at this.
The British flew us into Brussels. We had been cleaned up from the prison camp. We had been fed. I remember getting into Brussels. They gave us a couple of hours off. We went into a bar. We drank some beer. And then we went to sleep. And that was true liberation.
I had absolutely no fear that we were going to lose the war. We were going to win.
VE Day meant the end of a lot of struggle and a lot of heartache.
It was thrilled. It was all over.
I was on a B-17 crew, Victory in Europe Day. So we gathered up all these red flares, and there was a small hill behind our camp. Plugged these in all over the hill. Must have had 1,000 of them. And they lit them, all at the same time. It was quite a display. It was one of our celebrations.
My medic always wanted to go hunting, and he went out with his buddy, and within 20 minutes they come back with a deer. So we had venison on VE Day. We saved not only America, we saved Western culture, Western civilization.
World War II veterans have been the subject of countless books, TV shows, and blockbuster movies. If you're lucky enough to have had a veteran in your life, you know why. Their stories of courage, selfless service, and valor continue to inspire the generations that followed them. Take a listen to what made this the greatest generation.
Flying for your country is probably the high point of our life. $16 million of us served in the military. 8 million young women became Rosie the Rivers and built the airplanes and the tanks and the boats. So everybody was at war. There was a purity purpose, which was to eliminate evil. And we did that, all of us.
I built B-17s and B-29s. Now I was a riveter. First you're a bucker. When you sign in, you're a bucker. And then you become a riveter after you get, good at what you're doing. They didn't realize how capable American women were. We never had a chance to prove it. Hitler had said that he wouldn't have any trouble defeating us because he said American women couldn't produce. He said we spent too much time on cosmetics. I think we showed Hitler what American women were made of.
Wars are won. They're not won by bombing. They're not won by naval gunfire. They're won when a grunt moves forward, plants the flag and says, we're in charge. And it's the spirit of that 18-year-old Marine that brought us what we are today.
Tuskegee Airmen are black pilots, mechanics, and support people who, when our country declared war against Hitler, came forward and dispelled the biases and generalizations that because of the color of our skin we couldn't support our country in a technical area. Our task was to keep the air clear of German fighters that were destroying many of our bombers. You know, we thought we had enough guns on the B-17s and B-24s to protect them. That wasn't so, and that's why the escort work began. We also destroyed a lot of Germany's war-making potential on the ground.
I am the proud daughter of Colonel Lawrence E. Roberts, who was a member of the Tuskegee Airmen. I have an immense appreciation for this special broadcast to honor our World War II veterans for their sacrifices that led to peace for our great nation and our allies all around the world. Thank you, and bless you.
May 8th, 1945 will forever be known as VE Day, a Victory in Europe Day. It's the day World War II in the European theater of operations officially ended. By the middle of April 1945, the United States Army's 69th Infantry Division linked up with the Soviets at the Elbe River. The Third Army under General Patton penetrated deep into Germany, reaching as far north as Austria and Czechoslovakia. As the Allies closed in, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his Berlin bunker on April 30th. Karl Donitz became his successor, and knowing the war was lost, he ordered Alfred Jodl to sign the instruments of surrender in Reims, France on May 7th. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel then signed Germany's unconditional surrender in Berlin on May 8th, officially ending 6 years of brutal warfare in Europe.
In June of 1944, as my father hit the beach at Saipan with the Marines, his brother was at Normandy on the other side of the world. It's an incredible tale of courage, and it helps to illustrate the scope and scale of the conflict our nation was fighting. Those who stepped forward to serve during World War II, each of them served a cause bigger than themselves. The greatest generation understood that we live in an exceptional country, a country worth defending. And so the message I'd like to pass along to the World War II veterans and their families who are watching right now is very simple. I just simply want to say thank you.
Hello, I'm J.D. Crouch, CEO and President of the USO. The USO's mission of strengthening our armed forces by connecting them to family, home, and country began during World War II. During that war, more than 1 million Americans volunteered for the USO. On behalf of all USO employees and our 30,000 volunteers around the globe, we proudly commemorate your service and sacrifice on Victory in Europe Day. Thank you to all the veterans who courageously served during World War II.
Like a lot of Americans, I had forefathers who served in World War II, one of whom paid the ultimate price. And I'm very grateful to the veterans who are still with us today for the United States of America that we live in, the land of the free, the home of the brave. Thank you.
I wanted to take a moment to say thank you for all of your incredibly selfless and heroic acts of service while defending the liberty of the United States of America against fascism. The world remains in your debt.
There's a reason you're called the greatest generation. You set the standard, you set the bar, and a grateful nation hopes we can live up to it. Thank you for your service, and thank you for the victory that you secured 75 years ago. God bless you all and your families.
Yes, in democratic America, everybody is doing his bit. There goes Jimmy Stewart on his way to enlist. One of the most popular stars on the screen. Joining the Air Force as a private, Jimmy has now won promotion. Today, he's Lieutenant Stewart, USA. Joe Louis, who beat Max Schmeling. The Army can use that fighting spirit, and Joe Louis is now a corporal of cavalry, somewhere in the West. A movie star of modern times is sworn into service. Tyrone Power, hero of many a daring exploit on the silver screens of the world. He'll now play his greatest role as a leatherneck Marine. Franklin Roosevelt Jr. is in uniform. His fellow officer is Douglas Fairbanks Jr., a lieutenant in the Navy. Young Doug, like his famous father, every inch a man, is serving with the fleet. Clark Gable, at 41, renounces his throne as America's most popular film star to join the United States Army Air Force. Enlisting as a private, his ambition to become a crack aerial gunner in the crew of a bomber. This is the people's way of saying, from the home front to the battlefront, from movie stars to sales clerks, America's 130 million citizens are in the war.
Enlisted service members are the backbone of the military, both in World War II as well as today. And they have an advocate in the position that didn't exist during World War II. The senior enlisted advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Ramon Colon Lopez.
Today and always, we must never forget that our nation has faced many challenges, and our purpose remains the same, to protect our freedom. Just as the greatest generation embodied the love and loyalty for the ideals set forth in our Constitution, we know it is now our turn. The greatest generation did this for our country, and we shall do the same. I salute you and your families, and trust that we will keep the torch burning, and trust that we will keep America free.
I just want to give a shout out and a sincere thank you to all the World War II veterans.
Your service coming before us allowed us to serve today. Thank you so much. We as a society cannot thank you enough.
Thank you for showing me what valor looks like.
Thank you for your bravery, your sacrifices, and for paving the way for us.
We appreciate your service and everything that you have done for our country.
Without you, we wouldn't be here.
It means the world.
God bless you.
You truly are our national heroes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The legacy of our greatest generation lives on in those who wear the uniform. Many of those serving in the United States today were inspired to raise the right hand by veterans in their life. A father, a grandfather, a mother, an aunt. In fact, it was my father, retired Gunnery Sergeant Zappardino, who inspired me to join the United States Marine Corps. Thanks, Bob. From all those currently serving to those whose footsteps we follow, thank you.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you for joining us for this virtual commemoration of VE Day. Even though we are apart for now, we're never alone. The greatest generation showed the world that no matter the sacrifice required, Americans will face any challenge with grit, ingenuity, and a can-do attitude. In recent weeks, America's first responders, military, and healthcare professionals have shown that that same victory spirit is alive and well. We salute you. For more inspiring stories on World War II, visit Defense.gov. This is former First Lieutenant Tatiana Zappardino. Stay safe out there.